My warm Easter greetings to you all, and especially those in the Kingston Episcopal area of the Diocese of Southwark. I want to offer a short reflection for the fifth Sunday in Easter about the importance of asking questions in our lives and our Christian faith. And this is based on the verses from the Gospel set for this coming Sunday from John chapter 14, and especially Thomas's question to Jesus: how can we know the way? My family sometimes accuse me of asking far too many questions. My defence to that is that I'm always interested in what's going on. What are the deeper currents which might be flowing in any particular issue or situation? The asking of questions is absolutely central to our humanity. We encourage children to ask good questions and to explore the world that they live in and are growing into. In science, questions are fundamental if we are to grow in our knowledge of the wonderful and fascinating world in which we live. Life, of course, throws up an enormous number of questions which are extremely hard to answer, and especially so in the midst of a crisis such as the one we're going through now. And I've no doubt there's a tremendous amount of really hard thinking going on to try to deal with some of those questions. Some of them are practical ones. How long will the lockdown last? How can we find our way out of it in a safe way? How does the science work? And how are we to deal with the situation that we're in? Others are much deeper questions. What kind of world do we want to emerge and that we can begin to shape? Will it be a fairer world? Will it be a more ecologically friendly world as we go forward? And then, of course, there are theological questions about what happens when we die. Why is there such grief and sadness attached to human life, and especially at the time of death? And where is God in all of this? It's very good, I believe, to ask those questions, both in our Christian faith and in our world. Sometimes in Christian faith, the asking of questions can be seen in a rather negative light, that it almost inevitably leads to doubt and a kind of crippling of our faith. There's a hymn, Alleluia, Sing to Jesus, which contains a phrase which says, "Faith believes, nor questions how." I've never thought that. It's one of the phrases in the hymns I really don't like. I'm much more positive about the asking of questions. In the tradition, which is a very ancient one in our Christian faith, going right back to Augustine in the early 5th century, through Anselm in the 11th century, and right through to today, which speaks about the importance of faith seeking understanding. So questions can be very positive, and I believe lead to a much deeper faith. There are many people who ask questions in the Bible. We might think, particularly at the moment in our challenging time, of the Psalms of Lament, where from the depths of their hearts people are crying, "How long, O God, will this go on? Where is God? Why is this happening?" We have that in the wisdom literature, and particularly in Job, in his suffering. We have in Ecclesiastes explorations about the meaning of life. Moses in the book of Exodus famously asks God, "Who shall I say that you are when I speak to the people?" And God replies, "I am who I am." God is the source of all reality, the ground of being. In the Gospel reading set for the fifth Sunday of Easter, Jesus is speaking to his disciples before his death and resurrection. He tells them he's going to prepare a place for them. Thomas asks him, "How can we know the way?" And Jesus replies very straightforward, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he says. And then a little later, Philip says to Jesus, "Show us the Father, and we shall be satisfied." And Jesus replies to Philip by saying, Have I been with you so long, Philip, and you still do not know me? He who has seen me has seen the Father. In other words, in those verses from the beginning of John 14, Jesus is summing up that if we want to know the deep answers to the questions of life and God, we must look at the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Of course, it's not all about logic and reason. We don't get neat answers to many of the questions that we ask in our lives. As well as our thinking capacity, even more important in human life and in Christian faith is our ability to live in loving relationships with God, with each other, and with our world. And those need faith and trust. The scientist Charles Darwin, famously when he was thinking about whether or not to get married to his cousin Emma Wedgwood, drew up a list of pros and cons. He was trying to think through rationally what the right step would be. But of course, eventually he needed to get to the point where he made a step of trust and commitment into a loving faith relationship, which indeed he did. And the result for him and Emma, happily, was a long and good marriage. Even more fundamentally, in our relationship with God, Augustine of Hippo reminded us that we don't find our way to God by navigation, primarily through our thinking and our reasoning, but more fundamentally still through love. Like the disciples, and many people in the Bible, it's very, very good, I believe, to ask questions, and perhaps especially so in times of challenge and crisis. But even more fundamental as we explore those questions is our basic knowledge, our trust and faith in the sacrificial love of God, which is at his very heart, shown to us in Jesus Christ, and how that love and trust in that love brings life and hope even in the most challenging of times.